Hi, my name is Kayla, and my presentation is going to be on the zero tolerance policy and the school to prison pipeline and why these are not good for the education system and we need to change. So, the zero tolerance policy were first introduced in the late 1986 by Peter Nuez. He was a U.S. attorney in San Diego, and any vessel traveling by sea with even the smallest trace of drugs got impounded and charged in federal court. The policies were designed to create a strict and consistent approach to discipline. The idea is that with this approach, it would deter future violations. This led to districts taking inspiration. They implemented the zero tolerance policy and decided to use it on students in response to drugs, gangs, and weapons. But then it was broadened to even minor infractions like wearing a 5-inch plastic axe, which is what a young student did in Pennsylvania. He was wearing a fake axe, a part of his Halloween costume, and he was suspended. But he was 5, and his parents were probably the ones who dressed him. Anyways, the federal government has played a significant role in shaping the American education system to prepare students for the workforce and increase the production of human capital. So, in a book called Kids These Days by Malcolm Harris, he goes and talk about how they prepare students and what that means. So to prepare students, they all need to be instructable up to the minimal standard, display adequate progress, and to not interfere with other students' learnings. Students who are not able to manage these three things are considered a risk. Teachers and administrators have excised the disruptive elements, and they have accomplished that by increasing school disciplines. And you would think this would be a good thing, but if we look more into the book, Harris explores how younger generations are being affected by the economic and social structures of our society. He argues that young people are facing unique challenges and pressures that aren't being adequately addressed by our political and economic systems, and that we need to rethink our approaches to a number of different social institutions, one of them being education. Harris and other researchers argue that zero tolerance policies is an ineffective strategy to support students, considering the fact that it has been proven to be harmful to students further down the line. Schools and teachers have ulterior motives for removing kids from classrooms that have nothing to do with supporting them. How these policies contribute to racial inequality when it comes to education, incarceration, police presence in a school setting harm students because its purpose is to exclude them. Let's talk more about what this means and why these policies don't really work. In David Mitchell's Zero Tolerance Policies, Criminalizing Childhood and Disenfranchising the Next Generation of Citizens, he talks about how the increase in school discipline and zero tolerance is an ineffective strategy to support students, but an effective strategy to exclude them. Some schools even have a police officer in the schools and follow procedures that you would find in a youth detention center. Researcher Mitchell even adds the argument that Harris said earlier about how zero tolerance policies have both long and short-term consequences for students. In the short term, students who are suspended and expelled are deprived of valuable classroom instruction time, and if they're not studying outside or they have an alternate program, they won't be able to keep up and they fall even further behind. The long-term impact is that students who face these harsh penalties and are associated with the zero tolerance policy are more likely to drop out, and they're at an increased risk for contact with the juvenile justice system. And if they're in contact with that, there's an even more increased contact with the criminal justice system. Let's talk more about what this means, the school to prison pipeline, and how the zero tolerance feeds into it. So another researcher by the name Chauncey Smith wrote an article about the school to prison pipeline. They share that the phrase school to prison pipeline conceptually categorizes an ambiguous yet seemingly systemic process through which in a wide range of education and criminal justice policies and practices collectively result in students of color being pushed out of school and into prison. Zero tolerance policies illustrate how the intersection of education and criminal justice policies leads to minority students push out and potential incarceration. So schools with a larger population of Black kids um, are going to be more heavily um, zero tolerance is going to be more heavily put into their schools than if it was a more wider institution. And because of this, that means that we're funneling our Black kids into the prison system, and we're continuing to push racial inequality and racial rhetoric that is untrue. In these schools who implement zero tolerance policy, they often have a heavy police presence that teachers rely on to punish students. Um, so this means that there's schools all over the world, but especially in America, that push this idea that students need to behave a certain way. And if they don't behave a certain way, then they shouldn't be in school at all. And if they're not in school, then they're not learning and they're not being supported, and they're much more likely to fall into the prison system. So, um, since it's evident that zero tolerance policies are not effective in supporting students' behavior or their outcomes, the focus should shift towards an alternative approach that prioritizes understanding, empathy, and restorative justice. By addressing the underlying issues that lead to disciplinary problems and providing appropriate support and resources, schools can create an environment that truly supports the holistic development and success of all the students. It's crucial to reevaluate and reform zero tolerance policies in schools to ensure that they align with the goals of nurturing and empowering students rather than perpetuating harmful consequences and exaggerating inequalities. Thank you.